Hey guys, my name is Marcello, and welcome to an introduction on how to make asynchronous multiplayer games with Elympics. First of all, let me tell you what Elympics can do for you. Elympics offers several abstraction tools that will interact with each other in order to make your development as easy as possible. Elympics offers two Unity SDKs, the Elympics SDK, which allows you to make multiplayer games with ease, and the Playpad SDK, which allows your games to communicate with our hosting site, the Playpad. The Playpad is our hosting site, which acts as a bridge between your game and all of our systems. The Playpad keeps your game isolated from Web3 complexities, ensuring a streamlined and secure integration. Additionally, the Playpad integration makes your game future-proof, as we can add new features to the Playpad without you needing to update your game. Elympics also offers automated game server deployments to make matchmaking a piece of cake. And finally, integrated backend support. Our integrated backend support handles authentication, score saving, server deployment, and all Web3 complexities, so you just need to focus on making your game as good as possible. With all of this being said, let's get into how setting up your game with Elympics will look like. First and foremost, an explanation of how asynchronous multiplayer games work is important. Asynchronous multiplayer games are typically single-player games with an arcade game design approach. In these games, players will aim to achieve the highest score possible in a limited amount of time. These scores are then uploaded to a leaderboards, allowing players to compete for top rankings in tournaments. Hence, you're playing versus other players asynchronously. In the most basic approach, these games should consist of time-limited matches where the player achieves a score at the end of the match. However, there's a very important distinction to make here. These games are not to be played locally. These are multiplayer games in which you must implement a server-authoritative approach. What this means is that your client will connect to a server where the server will control the main game loop and logic. We do this in order to avoid cheaters that could easily intercept backend calls and change their score to the max, or change the games locally in order to have an advantage over other players. If you have any doubts about what the server authoritative principles are, please click in the link in the top right corner. With these ideas in mind, let's start getting set up with Elympics. The first thing you should do is visit the developer's console. You can find this at console.olympics.ai. Please create an account and log in. Once you have logged in, you'll be able to create your game in the developer's console. Please create new game, type in the name of your game. For the purposes of this tutorial, endless runner is fine, and for asynchronous games you need to set players to 1. Then you can click continue and add the solo queue. The solo queue is perfect for an asynchronous game. So I have already created this game. You can see it over here. Once this game is created, you can see the matchmaking queues you created with solo and default. Additionally, you can go to the settings and see your game ID and your game name. You can change the game name at any time, but the ID, of course, you cannot change. Once you've completed setting up your developer's console, we can jump back into Unity. The first thing you're going to have to do in Unity is install 3 packages. We can start by installing the Newtonsoft package, which you can do by name. I will add the name of the Newtonsoft package in the description, but you can also copy it from here. Now that Newtonsoft has completed installing, we will need to install the Unity SDK. You can find that in our GitHub links, which I'll also add in the description. Then go into code and copy the git clone link. And we jump back into Unity and we add a package from git URL and we copy the clone link. Now that the Elympics package has completed installing, we will also install the Playpad SDK. Do the same process as the Elympics SDK. Okay, now that we have Newtonsoft, the Elympics SDK, and the Playpad SDK installed, we can start talking about how your game should be set up. In the most basic approach, an Elympics game should have a minimum of 2 scenes. One scene, which will be the menu scene, and the second scene should be the gameplay scene. Of course, if you already have a gameplay scene created in your game, you do not need to create a new one, but for the purposes of this tutorial, we just made a new blank gameplay scene. We will get into the details of each scene later, but for now, you can just have these 2 scenes created. After you've created both scenes, please go into Tools, Elympics, Manage Games in Elympics, and over here, please log in with the same account that you've logged in your developer console. Once you've logged in, click Synchronize. And then you can see that the information of all the games you've created should be displayed here. So please click on Create First Game Config, and this will create a folder in your resources called Elympics with the Elympics config and the Elympics game config. These are very important. Now, you should overwrite the information down here with the information of the game you want. In my case, I want awesome game, so I overwrite the name and the game ID. Additionally, please change the players count to 1, and then you can link the gameplay scene over here. Then press save. You can see there's an upload button down here. You do not need to use this just yet, but what this button does is it uploads your gameplay scene as a server version. You can control the different server versions with this version input field right here. But don't worry about this for now, we'll get into that later. In order to make your multiplayer development easier and to implement a server-authoritative approach, Elympics comes with a parallel sync package included. You can find this by going into Parallel Sync Clones Manager, and over here, click Create New Clone. Parallel Sync allows you to open 2 Unity editor instances with the same source code, which is extremely useful because you only need to change one thing for both Unity editor instances to update. So once we've created the clone, you can open in New Editor. As you can see, I now have 2 instances of Unity open with the same game or the same project. On the left is my original project, and on the right is my clone. Now that you have both open, you can go into Tools, Elympics, select or create config. This will automatically select your Elympics config for you. Then you can scroll all the way down to find this mode dropdown. This mode dropdown offers several development modes to help your development. For now, we're going to focus on half remote. And then we can do the same for the clone. Now, both Unity editors are in half remote mode. What you can think of half remote is as gameplay testing, because what half remote allows you to do is simulate the connection between the server and the client. As you can see in the original, the awesome game is set to the server, and the clone is set to the client. This is intentional. The clones should always be clients. Then what this allow you to do is actually play on the client and see what happens on the server, so you can make your development a lot easier. To give you some context on how a server authoritative approach will look like, we have one of the games in production right now called 21 Solitaire. As you can see, we have the same setup as we had in the sample project, with the server being on the left and the client being on the right. Now, over here, you can notice that on the server, I can't click the cards, and this is intentional, whereas on the client, I can move the cards freely. Now, since this game is a turn-based game, we use RPC calls to manage the turns in the game. So what we want to do is we move the cards freely in the client, and then when we place it, we send an RPC to the server telling them, hey, we placed the card here. Then once the server is completed doing the operation, it acknowledges the RPC back to the client, and then the client can move again. This is important because we want all of the logic to be server authoritative. So once I place the card on the client, it sends the message to the server to place the card, then the server increases the score, and the client only displays the score. The same thing is happening for the match timer. The server is the one actually lowering the time of the match, and the client is only displaying the score. Additionally, in the server, you want to save as many resources as possible. So one thing, or some simple things that you can do is, for example, once I place these 2 cards, an animation will show clearing the column. You can see the animation was shown here, but on the server, no animation was shown. So we want to make the server as efficient as possible to make sure we don't have any issues. And you can do the same thing with many things. You can remove sound on the server. We could even take it one step further and completely remove the rendering of the images on the server. For the video, we don't want to do that since it's not very visual, but you get the idea. So with this in mind, please make sure your games are server authoritative, and if you have a turn-based game, feel free to use the RPC methods mentioned earlier. One thing to note is that half remote is going to be where you spend most of your development time. You need to make sure your synchronization is as efficient as possible and that it takes into account things like lag, bad internet connection, etc. So once you've completed your half remote implementation and you think you're confident that it's good to go, you can come back into Tools, Elympics, Manage Games in Elympics, and you can upload your first server version. So I already have version 1 uploaded, so I'm going to call it version 2, and we can click Upload. If everything went well during upload, then you can go back into your developers console and you can click on versions, and you can see we have server version 2 over here and server version 1. In order for you to understand why the menu scene is important, it will be pertinent to explain first how tournaments work. For that, I would like to use one of our games in production called Sweet Rush. Let's play a quick match first though. Now that we have completed the game, you can see that I ended the score with 2200. As you can see now, my score has been updated in the leaderboard, and you can see the guest's name, since I'm not logged in, with 2200 score. So the main menu scene, for starters, is used to display the leaderboard, which is extremely important if you're in an asynchronous game, right? You would like to know if you are winning or if you are losing. Additionally, the score shows some features that come included in the Playpad. For example, tournament switching. If I click on this button, it will ask our Playpad to open this dropdown where you can change from all the tournaments you are currently participating in. You can also click this prize pool button to show how the prize pool is being distributed. In this case, we are distributing respect points. Don't worry too much about what respect points are. We handle this on our side. And for these respect points, they are being distributed to the top 3 positions. Apart from that, the menu scene also allows our Playpad to show the authentication top bar. When you click Connect Wallet, this will trigger your browser to open up your Web3 authentication apps. In my case, I use MetaMask. When I log in with MetaMask, you can see that my game will update and I will log in with my account. To show you the power of the Playpad and of making your games future-proof, I want to show you 3 different examples of tournaments. In the middle, we have the daily tournament, which is the tournament that we participated in earlier. Daily tournaments happen every 24 hours and are automatically created by Elympics. In these tournaments, players compete for respect points, which will be automatically distributed when the tournament ends. Apart from this, we have what we call casual tournaments. In casual tournaments, there is no prize pool. Players compete for the fame and glory of beating their friends. And additionally, we have what we like to call competitive tournaments. In competitive tournaments, there is a prize pool, and the prize pool is based off of crypto. The crypto prize pool increases every time a player joins the tournament. As you can see here, when I click enter, it will ask me to buy a ticket in order to participate in the tournament. Once I buy a ticket and I participate in the tournament, the prize pool will start building up. It will build up higher the more people participate in the tournament and the more tickets are purchased. If you click over here, you can see the prize pool is distributed among the top 3 places, but users can control this when they create a tournament. Then when this tournament ends, the prize pool will be distributed and everyone will make their money. So the reason I'm showing you this is because all of this is controlled by our hosting site, the Playpad. All your game needs to do is implement the main menu correctly, and all of these features will be automatically included in your game. Your game will be able to automatically change between all these tournaments. You can see here, I can go into the daily tournament and change it immediately, and I can go into my free tournament that I created in the same window. All of this is supported automatically by the Playpad as long as the main menu scene is implemented. In order to make your main menu implementation easier, we have created what we like to call the asynchronous game sample. This sample basically has all the main features that you need to implement in your main menu and is maintained by Elympics, so you don't have to worry about maintaining the menu. Now, you can find the sample by going to Windows, Package Manager, find the Elympics Playpad package, click Samples. Over here, then you can import the sample. Once a sample has completed importing, you can go into your assets folder and notice that a new samples folder has been created. Then open up all these folders until you get into the root folder called Asynchronous Game Lobby Sample with leaderboards. Then open up the lobby folder and you can find the Async Game Lobby scene over here. If Unity asks you to import TMP essentials, please do so, as we use TMP in order to generate the text and the images, etc. Now that you have the async game sample, you can notice that this sample comes equipped with all the features that are used in the Playpad. For example, the button for the prize pool, the button for the daily tournaments, and the play button which starts your game scene. These don't work in the editor, that is by design, so do not worry about this. You can check the code if you're curious to see how they work. Now that you have the sample implemented, you can go into Files, Build Settings, and drag this sample as your first build. Also note, you should have your gameplay scene as the second one, so let's just set it up now. Okay, since we have the sample as our first scene in the index, your game will automatically open with the main menu sample as the first scene of your game. Please note, the sample is very gray and very boring, and this is done intentionally. We ask you to please change the sample visuals to match the aesthetic of your game, because a main menu in a game should at least match the aesthetics of the game. And we can't predict what aesthetic you are going to go for, so please note you can change that. Additionally, the sample comes with a lot of features that you can extend. These features include changing how the leaderboard entry is highlighted, or changing the play button text to have different play buttons depending on the tournament type, etc. We also ask you that when you change the prefabs in the sample, you create prefab variants. Prefab variants are useful in case we update the sample. You can update the package version and re-import the sample, and it should not break your game, therefore allowing Elympics to maintain your game. This is not mandatory. You can, of course, create your own version of the main menu using the sample as an example. Whatever you'd like to do, we allow you to use the sample in your main game as is, so do so as you wish. You may have also noticed that the sample also comes with a folder called Gameplay. You can open up this gameplay and find a scene here called the Async Game Sample Gameplay. With this gameplay scene, you have a lot of features that Elympics offers already implemented, which you can take as inspiration or just copy into your game. Some of these are random synchronization, RPC, disconnection handling, how to end the game with Elympics, etc. There's a lot of things in this sample that are very useful to you, so please take the time to explore it and take inspiration on how to start your game or implement your game from the sample. To show you how useful the sample is, let's go back to the example of 21 Solitaire. So the first thing we need to do is go into Tools, Elympics, Selector, Create Config, find our Elympics config, and set this to Debug Online Player Mode. What Debug Online Player Mode does is that it actually allows our Unity editor to serve as a client and connect to a server which is automatically created and deployed by our backend, so you can simulate what will actually happen when the game is hosted on the Playpad and when users click play. But for this to work, you need to first make sure that your half remote is working perfectly fine, your latest server version is uploaded and configured here correctly, and you need to make sure your game scene is set as the second scene in your build index and the sample scene is set as the first scene in your build index. With all of these things set, we can click play. You can see that our authentication screen is showing, and then when we actually click play in game, you will see some logs start to show. These logs are basically telling us that, or telling the client that, hey, you are connecting to this room ID with this match ID and this server ID, etc. This is useful for debugging purposes in case you want to find server logs or something else. But anyway, now that we're actually connected to the server online, we can play the game as normal because half remote was correctly implemented in this case. If you have any issues in debug online mode, you can check for server logs to see if something is breaking in the server that you did not expect. Maybe you are getting way more lag than you anticipated and you need to change the way your game synchronization works because it's really laggy when it's actually using internet connection instead of local connection, and etc. There are many things that can be done here, but half remote debug online mode is very useful for this purpose. One thing you should note is that the leaderboards and the tournament information do not work in the Unity editor, and this is by design. The reason for this is that this information is sent to the client via the Playpad, but of course the Unity editor is not hosted on the Playpad, so we do not receive this information. However, Elympics has made some very useful solutions in order for you to test different leaderboards, to test tournament, and etc. But for this, there's another video we made in a masterclass, which you can find in the top right corner. When you are satisfied with your debug online mode working as intended, we can go ahead and create a build of the client to upload to the Playpad. What you need to do is go into build settings, make sure you have the correct scenes set as we mentioned previously, set this to WebGL. Okay. When this is set to WebGL, you can also go into the player settings and change some WebGL settings over here. These exception settings allow you to change how logs are shown in the browser. Explicitly thrown exceptions only is not very useful for debugging, but if you'd like to debug, you can make a full with stack trace debug option. This will give you essentially the same logs as in the editor, which is not secure. If you want to release your game to the public, this should be removed, but for testing, it's perfectly fine. Additionally, as Unity tells you, it significantly decreases performance, so it should 100% never be used when you are going to publish your game. So for now, let's just remove it. And another thing you can do is add compression to your game. Compression makes the build size significantly smaller, which will make your game load faster. But for now, let's also disable compression. Okay, this is done. Then we can go ahead and create a build. You can select clean build over here, and I made a folder in my desktop called test solitaire. One little tip that you can do is you can call the folder name whatever you want to call your client version. For this purpose, it's called test solitaire, but if you want to make the first client version, you can call this folder 1, v1, etc. And then you select folder and make a build. So once this build is completed, we will continue on to the next step. Now that my build has completed, you can see the test solitaire folder filled with the basics of a Unity WebGL build. Okay, so for Elympics, we do not need these files or folders. You can delete them. We only need the build folder. If you go inside the build folder, notice how all your files have the test solitaire name as the start. This was what I mentioned earlier by making your folder name the same name as your client version. This will just make your life easier instead of having to rename all these files manually. Okay, now that we have the build folder with everything correct inside, you will need two files in order to upload your games into Elympics. The first file is a secret JSON key. I, of course, already have this JSON key for Solitaire, but if you do not have this JSON key, please go into the developers Discord and request the JSON key there. You will find a channel to request the JSON keys, and you will find a channel to authenticate as a developer. Also, this Discord is very useful if you have any questions, so please feel free to drop by and ask us any questions you have. The second file that you will need is a bash script called upload.sh. Upload.sh you can find with a GitHub link that I will post in the description of this video. Now that we have the JSON key, the bash script on our build folder, you have to open a bash terminal. You don't need to run this as an administrator, but it's a habit I have from developing, so do as you wish. Then cd into the folder. In my case, my folder is in the desktop, so I will cd desktop test and any. You can see the cd command, if you are not aware, is basically a simple command to change folders in the terminal. Then you have to give it the path of the folder. The asterisk, what it does is that it says anything after test. Since I only have one folder with test in my desktop, this is easy. But for you, for example, you could say cd desktop/1 if that's the name of your folder, or you could type out the entire name. but that's just some Linux stuff. You don't have to worry about that. Okay, the next thing you have to do is call the bash command upload.sh copy and the name of your JSON folder. In my case, it's solitaire21, and then the folder you want to upload to our bucket. The folder should always be called build, but in case you called it something else, you can change this name. Once this is done, you will press enter, and we will just wait until this bash script finishes uploading the version. When the bash script has completed uploading your game version, you can go into your browser and type hosting.olympics.ai / the same name as your JSON key, in my case solitaire21, and then the name of the files you uploaded. Remember how I showed you that the files were all called test solitaire? This is the reason why I was saying it. It will make your life very easy if you call these in a simple way that you can remember. So in my case, they're called test solitaire. Then I can press enter, and you can see our Playpad will start to open your game build. Here, our Playpad will open your game build. You can see we use the async game sample scene, which is the first index of our build. You can see now the buttons all work as intended, and we already have some live players. This is because Solitaire is in production and people are playing the game. Then when we press play, we can play a match of Solitaire. As you can see, I am very bad at this game. I definitely did not lose intentionally, and I got a score of 25. Now when I press continue, my score of 25 will be shown right at the bottom of the leaderboards. And yep, this is how the sample can be useful to you. It has all the functionalities needed already implemented, and you can use it in production immediately, as long as you change the UI. Please change the UI. Now that you understand the basics of programming with Elympics, I want to wish you good luck and happy programming. If you have any questions, please reach out to us in our developers Discord. And also, please make sure to always check the documentation for the latest information and requirements. Thank you for watching. Marcello signing out.